Welcome to Rams Up, your weekly LA Rams podcast. Bi-weekly during the season, we are a proud member of the Pigskin Podcast Network. We'll cover other SoCal sports items of interest, but we're mostly about your Los Angeles Rams. I'm your host, Mark. Let's get to it. Welcome back, Ram fans. This is your LA Rams podcast. Your host, Mark here. Season 2, Episode 10. Hopefully you caught Episodes 7, 8, and 9 last Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We did a circuit around the NFC West. We visited with podcasters from the Cardinals, Seahawks, and 49ers. Had a good time with all three of them, checking in on our NFC West rivals to see how they are doing this offseason. Really good stuff. I encourage you to go back and check out those 3 episodes. Now we turn our attention to the draft and a couple other fun things we have in mind for this podcast. So coming up on this episode, we're going to have Tom Courts on to talk about Deebo Samuel and the Bobby Wagner contract. We'll also discuss the Honey Badger, yay or nay for the Rams. I'm going to compare my most recent power rankings to Colin Cowherd's, the power rankings he just released. And I also have my first Rams mock draft to share with you. And we're also going to have a sports pet peeve you'll enjoy and a very unique Fearsome Four, I'm not sure what to call it, a Fearsome Four something that I think you'll enjoy. Before we get into the meat of our podcast, I'd like to talk briefly about the passing of Dwayne Haskins. Looked like he was trying to get things together with the Steelers. Killed in South Florida, trying to cross the 595, hit by a dump truck, and apparently killed instantly. Really sad. Seemed like he was doing all the right things to get his career back on track. Steelers seemed to be in love with him, his teammates as well. The saddest thing about this whole affair, well, maybe not the saddest is that a 24-year-old young man died, but almost as distressing is, one, the coverage of his death. A couple of reporters made some mistakes in that regard, but equally as distressing is the focus many people have on this coverage. Everybody just needs to let it go. A couple of reporters blew it. Let's get back to focusing on the loss of life here. That's what the focus here should be. So rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. Really sad day for the NFL. During our circuit through the NFC West, I mentioned real briefly that the Rams had signed free agent punter Riley Dixon. I wanted to add a little bit more detail to that. Dixon is very similar to Johnny Hekker in a lot of ways, especially over the last year statistically, but kind of interesting. Hekker 6'5", 225, Dixon 6'4", 221. So stature-wise, very similar. Statistically, last year, Dixon had a lot more punts, 74-51, due to the team he was playing for, the offensively inept New York Giants. Even though he had 23 more punts, he only had one more dropped inside the 20 than Hekker, so that's a little alarming. Average-wise, very similar. Dixon 44.4, Hekker 44.2. Net, Hekker significantly better, 42.6 to 39.5. But of course, that is a special teams stat as much as it is a punting stat. But most importantly, consider this. Last year, Hekker was paid $3.7 million, and this year he will carry a dead cap hit of $942,000. Now, Dixon's going to hit the Rams for $895 on their salary cap. So you're basically getting Dixon for half of what it would have cost to have Hekker on the roster. And Hekker, yeah, he's capable of pulling off those magical kicks inside the 20 on occasion, but he's really lost the distance. He's a little bit older, getting up there in years. His play has been tailing off. Dixon, younger, with a better special teams unit behind him. I think this is a good move for the Rams. Now, we won't know for sure A couple years down the road, we'll look back and we'll decide if the Rams made the right move. But as I discussed recently, the Rams are really good at knowing who to let walk. The NBA playoffs mean next level basketball. Get ready for all of the action by betting the play-in tournament with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code TPPN. Bet $5 on any NBA team to win their game during the play-in tournament and get $150 in free bets instantly. That's promo code TPPN at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. As I mentioned earlier, our primary focus over the next few weeks will be the NFL Draft. And just like last year, I will be posting periodic mock drafts. Now for this first mock draft, the first thing I considered is what do they need this year? And in my opinion, it's in order: cornerback, offensive line, and edge. A lot of people are calling out edge as one of their biggest needs. I'm not sure I'm in full agreement with that. Leonard Floyd, Justin Hollins, Terrell Lewis, Chris Garrett on board right now. No Von Miller, but you know what? We played half the season without Von, and our pass rush was just fine. So is there room for improvement? Yeah, well, there's room for improvement basically everywhere. But I'll leave edge on here. Biggest needs this year: cornerback, offensive line, and edge. But what about next year? Because when you're drafting in the 3rd through 7th rounds, oftentimes you're going to find a player that doesn't play much that first year but is ready to go the second year. The Rams have done this many times. And who are their free agents next year? They're unrestricted free agents in 2023. 2 defensive linemen, A'Shawn Robinson and Greg Gaines. 3 offensive linemen, including 2 starters, Rob Havenstein, David Edwards, and Bobby Evans. 2 safeties and a cornerback, Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott, and David Long. So while you may think we don't need a defensive lineman this year or even a safety, they may want to invest this year in both of those position groups so they're not stung real bad next year. Now, of course, there's the other aspect of it. The Rams will have some additional money to go out and sign free agents. A'Shawn Robinson right now getting paid at $8.5 million, Rob Havenstein $8.1 million, and hopefully we can keep some of these guys. I'm sure some of them will want to stick around. So this year, yes, cornerback, offensive lineman, and edge. Next year, offensive lineman, safety, and defensive line. So for my mock draft, I identified what players I wanted, what positions I wanted, and I decided in this draft I was going to try to take 2 offensive linemen, preferably interior and tackle, 2 cornerbacks, as versatile as I can find, 2 defensive linemen, 1 safety, and 1 edge. The highest priority is cornerback. I'd like them to come out with a big interior offensive lineman. I'd like a monster defensive lineman. And if value is there, an edge rusher. And I'd also like to grab a versatile safety. So using the Draft Network's mock draft simulator, this is what I got. My first pick, number 104 overall, Zion McCollum, cornerback out of Sam Houston State. Team captain, tons of intangibles, and a zone fit. This is right about where he would be taken, I suspect. Good value, and it matches my number 1 priority: grab a cornerback. My second pick, 142 overall, John Ridgeway, interior defensive lineman out of Arkansas. Very versatile along a 3-man front. Again, good value here. This is more for next year with Gaines and Robinson set to be free agents, undrafted free agents. And I'm not sure what we have in Bobby Brown yet. So John Ridgeway with that second pick for the Rams. The third pick, 175 overall, Thayer Munford, interior offensive line, Ohio State. I was tempted to take the edge guy here, Alex Wright, but saw appeal in Munford. He's versatile, played in a big-time program, 4-year starter, type of guy the Rams like. Now, he's labeled as interior offensive line. He can play tackle, though. Fourth pick, 211th pick overall, cornerback Demarion Williams out of Houston. So I actually have 2 cornerbacks already. And I don't feel bad about that. Another team captain. He can play outside the slot and has even played a little bit of safety. Fifth pick, 212 overall, James Empey, interior offensive line out of BYU. He's a little bit older. He's already done his mission for the LDS. 6'4", 303. His dad is the BYU O-line coach. It's another thing the Rams have always leaned on is guys that have football in the family. He's not a great athlete, but he can get it done in the middle. Next pick, 218 overall, Isaiah Polamau, safety out of USC, 6'4", 205. Another really versatile guy. He could potentially play some corner, but if he's a single high safety, he can cover ground, very fast, sideline to sideline guy. Hey, I kind of like safeties out of USC. Who doesn't? Second to last pick, number 7 for the Rams, 238 overall. I finally get my edge guy, Michael Clemens out of Texas A&M, 6'5", 263. High motor, highly productive over the last 2 seasons, 11 sacks. Long and strong, a little stiff, they say. But most scouts don't have any problem with this guy, and there's hopes that he could be a starter at the NFL level. And the last pick, I had originally said I wanted to get 2 defensive linemen, but I went with a running back here, Zonovan Knight, the running back out of North Carolina State. He was the second highest guy on the board at that point, 5'11", 210, compares favorably to someone like Lamar Miller, perfect in his zone scheme, needs a little bit of work in pass blocking and receiving. Explosive runner, and the reason I decided to take a running back is every one of the Rams' top 3 running backs has an injury concern of some type. So get a young guy in there. Doesn't have to contribute unless someone goes down. Now, right after this, I ran an automated draft using the network's predictive model. And they actually went with a safety first, Dane Belton out of Iowa. I didn't really like that pick. When your first pick isn't till late in the 3rd round, you got to pick a little bit for a need, right? And safety is not something they need this year. Their next pick was Dominique Robinson, edge. I'm okay with that. They actually picked Thayer Munford, just as I did, and they followed that with a linebacker, Joshua Ross. I was not thinking linebacker at all in this draft. Just don't see it as a need. It's never been a point of emphasis for the Rams, and I don't think it will be this year. Next up, they picked Marquand McCall, an interior defensive lineman out of Kentucky. Makes sense. James Mitchell, a tight end out of Virginia Tech, another position I took off my board. Now, Les Snead and Sean McVay may have some tight end that they are absolutely in love with, but how are we to know? I'm not going to pick a tight end if I'm picking for the Rams. And with the Rams' 7th pick, they actually went with a running back as well, Jerion Ely out of Ole Miss. And the last pick, a cornerback, Jalen Armour Davis out of Alabama. And this is why I think this automated draft is a little screwy. In my mind, cornerback is their biggest need, and they don't pick one until the Rams' final pick. So I like my picks better. Might have liked it more if I had found 2 defensive linemen instead of just 1. Maybe not the running back, but that's my first mock draft using the Draft Network's predictive model, me making the picks, and then the second set, automated picks by the Draft Network. We will do this again occasionally. Hey, if you have a mock draft you want me to share, just send us an email, ramsuppodcast@gmail.com, see what we can do. Haven't done a sports pet peeve in a while, but we got a new one for you. If you are watching the Houston, Illinois March Madness basketball game, you probably know what I'm going to talk about. There was a technical called in that game on Illinois player R.J. Melendez for hanging on the rim. After a slam dunk, hung on the rim a little longer than the refs cared for, and they teed him up. Reggie Miller was the color commentator on that game, and he went ballistic. How can you call that? And they'll let you hang on the rim if it's for your own safety or another player's safety who happens to be beneath you, crossing underneath, that sort of thing. But if they feel like you're hanging on the rim just to kind of show off, maybe consider it taunting, they'll tee you up. The problem is it's such a judgment call. And when a player slam dunks the ball, he really can't make that assessment in real time, whether it's safe to let go of the rim. In fact, I would say hanging onto the rim is always a good idea, at least for a second, for your own safety. Now, I prefer not to slam dunk myself. I'll just take the shots from outside. More of a set shot kind of guy. But if I decided I was going to slam dunk, I'm going to hang on the rim for a second if anybody is near me. Defenders or teammates, I'm going to hang on to the rim a little while. But maybe that's just me. They really need to get rid of this rule. Now, there's going to be times where it's obvious someone is hanging on the rim and making a fool of themselves. Go ahead, tee them up. But plays like this, you hang on for just another second, dangle there for a minute to make sure it's clear underneath. You can't be teeing people up for this. Just get rid of the hanging on the rim technical foul and just have a generic taunting technical foul. Hey, I've seen people shoot threes and keep that same pose for 4 seconds after the shot. Is it really that much different? At least when you're hanging on the rim, there's a possibility you could hurt somebody, including yourself, by letting go. And can't they at least just give a warning? They give a warning for flopping, but not for hanging on the rim. I don't know. I don't like this rule. Nobody liked that call. Got to get rid of it. Got to get rid of this blanket technical foul for hanging on the rim. Just make it a taunting technical, but it's got to be super obvious. Not every time someone hangs on a rim for 2 seconds. Hey everybody, I have Tom Kortz with me, and we are going to hit on a few subjects of interest. Off the top, let's talk about Deebo Samuel and what's going on with him and the Niners. I know he's playing the social media game, trying to maybe back the Niners into a corner once that new contract. And I know you have some opinions on that and how it basically relates to the do business as opposed to the way the Rams do business. So fill us all in. What's going on with Samuel and the 49ers?
Yeah, well, Deebo, obviously everybody knows he took down his social media as it relates to the Niners. But what's interesting about that is that he did it in a very specific way. And we actually went through all of his photos from on Instagram essentially forever in the last, essentially 2 years. And took down anything as it related to the Niners. There was 80 pictures reportedly, one by one, and he left everything up. So it was a lot of work. It wasn't just let's take down the Niners, on his front page or something like that, which some of the other people have done. So that is, if you read into that, it may be a indication that, he's very unhappy with how the conversations are going between his representation and the Niners. But, obviously from his perspective, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill get their deals, and then this was all triggered right after Stephon Diggs got his extension. And to summarize those deals, they're roughly $20 to $25 million a year, and just as importantly is the guaranteed money, which is 65 for Adams and 72 for Diggs, and Tyreek, I think, around 70. So 65 to 70 roughly in guaranteed money. And so from Deebo's perspective, he's 26, entering the prime of his career. These guys are sort of, on their second contracts, and kind of maybe heading into at the peak of their careers now, and maybe heading into decline. He accounted for 25%, roughly 25, 27% of San Francisco's entire offense last year. And only three other players only three other players in the league were in that realm. And then, on top of that, he's really innovated this wide back position, and in a big way. I mean, obviously it was Shanahan's plan, but without a player like Deebo, you're not going to be able to do it. Somebody that has that kind of speed, but also that kind of physicality that can take those kind of that kind of a beating coming out of the backfield like he did, running into linemen and linebackers. So that's Deebo's perspective is, hey, I've meant everything to you guys. I've given you everything I can. Everything you've asked for. I've taken a beating physically to try and get us over the hump, and I want to get paid. And I want to get paid with the top players in the league.
But you also think, if I understand what you told me earlier, before we had this conversation, you're wondering if the Niners are willing to do that based on their business model.
Yeah. And so from the team's perspective, from the Niners' perspective, those three receivers that got paid, those top receivers in the league, they're all performed at an all-pro level for multiple years. Got teams over their playoff teams, Super Bowl champion in the case of Tyreek Hill. Devontae Adams obviously been performing for many years. Same with Stephon Diggs, at a top level for multiple years. And Deebo has only performed at that level for 1 year. He did not have a good first year. He was injured, and he really emerged for 1 year. So from their perspective, hey, show us another year and show us that you can stay on the field and stay healthy and continue to perform. And then we'll look at your extension after year 3. So Deebo's still on his rookie contract, and if they have the team has all the leverage, right? They can, worst case for Deebo, they could have him play this year out at his rookie deal around $4 million or whatever it is, and then theoretically could franchise tag him each of the next 2 years. And that's not where any player wants to be. Certainly, I think the Niners wouldn't want it to be there, but at the end of the day, that's the leverage that they have. Those are the rules. Not a lot of people don't like it, but it is, and it happens. So, and then the other thought is, are the Niners going to pay top dollar for that position, right? Are they going to extend somebody for 70, with a $70 million guarantee when the most they've ever extended somebody is much lower than that? That's not their norm. So the whole other rub to this, Mark, is that this is not just a Deebo Samuel San Francisco 49er conversation. This is something's happened in the league over the last 3 months where the wide receiver position is just inflated in their contract sizes dramatically. And these trades that are happening are almost quarterback-like in terms of what teams are giving up to get these top receivers and then paying them top dollar.
Even the Christian Kirk contract.
Christian Kirk, many see as a number 2 wide receiver, but the draft picks that the Las Vegas gave up for Devontae Adams and Miami gave up for Tyreek Hill, and the kind of money they're getting paid, and the reason that's so there's such a debate around that is because at the very same time we're seeing these wide receivers coming out and performing extremely well right away in their rookie rookie years. Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, Justin Jefferson,
right,
Devontae Smith, and the list goes on. And it doesn't. This year's draft is everybody's talking about the wide receivers. As many as 5 could go in the top 15 or 20. So on the one hand, you have people paying top dollar, and on the other hand, there's this glut of wide receivers that's available, and so the question is, relating back to Deebo, is which camp are the 49ers in? Right, we know what camp the Packers were in. Let's let him go. We'll get draft picks. We'll save a ton of money on the cap and be able to draft some guys and plug them in. And it's the same thing that the Chiefs feel. And so the question is, where are the 49ers? Are they in the, we're going to pay top dollar in the Miami, Las Vegas camp? Or are they in the, hey, let's cash them in for assets and draft some guys that can plug in and play right away?
Yeah. And the other side of it is, a lot of times teams are willing to pay top dollar to their top performers when they have a quarterback on a rookie contract. But usually those are cases when your quarterback is a known quantity and has proven himself. And I'm not sure if that's true with Trey Lance. I'm sure they're certainly hopeful he is that guy. And, okay, we have him on a rookie contract for the next 3 years or whatever. So let's go ahead and spend the money on Deebo. And then the downside, of course, if it doesn't work out, I mean, Trey Lance taking over the reins, having Deebo there would be so important for him to be able to lean on Deebo. And if he doesn't have him, if things go sideways, that's bad news for the 49ers, in my opinion.
Exactly. And, you're right. Exactly right. Deebo would be very important to Trey Lance's success. So it'll be interesting to see what they ultimately do, how they treat it. The other consideration, of course, is the salary cap is going up a lot, right? It's going to be potentially 230, 240 next year, and then up to even potentially even 300 the following year, with given all this new TV money and Amazon money coming into the NFL. So a lot of these deals that have been signed over the last year or two are looking pretty good right now. Patrick Mahomes' contract, it's almost a bargain at this point. And, because he was signed for 10 years. And so, but those things will get renegotiated. But the point is that signing people at top dollar right now doesn't mean it's going to be top dollar in a year or two. And so the 49ers may look at that and sort of maybe compromise and say, hey, we'll give you 60, 65 million guaranteed Deebo, and average per year of 25. Let's put it at 2 years, and make it 50 guaranteed, and guarantee the whole thing. And that way, if you don't stay healthy, then we're not on the hook for multiple years. And if you do stay healthy, then you can get paid either by us or somebody else. So there's a lot of ways to go.
Okay, hey, let's move on to Bobby Wagner. There was a lot of misunderstanding going on about what his contract actually was. And I know some media personalities got involved in that discussion. Wagner represents himself, and a lot of people are saying, hey, he could have got more money from the Ravens. He turned it down for the Rams. I read one article talking about how the Rams went too deep on this contract and they're going to end up getting bitten by it. But if the details of this contract are that I understand now as they're playing out, it actually gives the Rams an escape clause. But I would rather you try to explain it, because I think you have a better grasp of it.
Yeah. So the way that it is very intricate, and what's interesting about how intricate it is that Bobby Wagner, negotiated this himself, right? The layers to this contract are actually quite complex, but in summary, it's essentially the worst case is it's 2 years, 17.5 million, with up to 23 million, 23.5 million. So another $6 million in bonuses. So it would put him at about $8 million a year average for the first 2 years, with up to, an additional 3 million in bonuses per year. And there like many contracts, given the expectation that the cap will increase next year, there's only a $2.5 million cap hit this year for what it's worth. But a lot of contracts have been negotiated in that fashion. including, say, notably for Rams, Stafford's contract, I think is only a $7.5 million cap hit this year. So, but when you look at it further, the way it plays out is it's essentially averages about $9.5 million a year over 5 years. But the Rams have per year over 5 years. But the Rams have escape hatches where the dead money isn't that bad if they want to get out in year 3, 4, or 5.
Can't they get it out of it as soon as next year?
They can. There's a bit much bigger dead money hit if they do it next year. But after year 2, if they get out of it, then the dead money hit is nominal. So that's why people are reporting it as essentially a 2-year deal, $9 million a year, $8 million a year with an additional $3 million a year in bonuses. And
this seems like a good deal for both sides. It seems like, Wagner gets a chance to. It's kind of a prove it deal, where he's going to get some real money up front though, and he gets to play in LA. And if it doesn't work out, the Rams can escape at the right moment. And everybody wins from what I can see. It looks like a good contract for both sides.
Yeah, it is. It's the way they staged it is, as long as he continues to perform, he gets paid. Sort of in that $10 million a year range, and it's a kind of a year-to-year thing, right? It's sort of already spelled out. They can, of course, always renegotiate it at any time, depending on how things go. But essentially, it's like I say, a 2-year deal for all practical purposes, with some heavy bonuses, and then it's a year-to-year deal after that at about $10 million.
Yeah, that's it was interesting to see the back and forth in the media about that. And I think it was because of the complexity and because Wagner doesn't have an agent, so he kind of had to speak for himself. But it was a little bit entertaining. Last thing I'd like to talk to you about, get your opinion on this. I have mine. A little bit of a battle between various Ram fans about whether they should pursue the honey badger. Now, let me state my position on this. I see the Rams having 4 viable safeties. I mean, I think Fuller and Scott, are the starters right now, perhaps Fuller and Rapp, but I think it'd be Fuller and Scott with Burgess and Rapp as the backups. That's not a bad safety room. You could certainly do worse. And meanwhile, we're a little short on cornerbacks. And now I talked to a few people and they said, the Ram model is if there's a good player out there, go get him. When they drafted Aaron Donald, they didn't need defensive linemen. When they drafted Todd Gurley, they didn't need running backs. They went out and got difference makers, though. And I understand that argument. My position is when you are strapped up against the cap, you just better take care of some other things first, perhaps, and not sign someone that's going to preclude you from making a move that may be more important. So that's my position. Would I be happy if the Rams signed the honey badger? Sure, I would be. But, you also have to be aware, you have to be reasonable about it and say, we may end up being a little bit shorthanded at cornerback down the road because we're so stocked at safety. That's my take on it. What's yours?
Yeah, the Rams don't traditionally pay top dollar for this position, right? This is a position that they feel at safety that they can draft guys and they can play right away. And we have, Jordan Fuller, Taylor Rapp, and Nick Scott, Terrell Burgess doing exactly that. And those are young guys that have a lot of athleticism. That obviously that secondary is led by Jalen Ramsey. They do have a hole at that other cornerback position. For sure. And I don't see them signing honey badger at all. I think that other teams have pay a much higher premium and put a higher premium on that position. And we know what Seattle did with, for Jamal Adams, right? So I don't see the Rams doing it. Obviously it's going to cost them a comp pick, which is something that's they hold near and dear to their hearts. It's essential that they accumulate comp picks in order to have those, get the draft picks and retain those. So they've already given up one comp pick next year with the Allen Robinson signing. And so that's another reason that it sort of doesn't fit with their, what they've done traditionally. So I don't see them doing it. I hope they don't do it. And I hope that they focus on cornerback and right guard in particular in the draft. And, with a nod to the edge, although I think we'll be fine with Hollins and Lewis and maybe a midseason, trade deadline signing, which is kind of what their MO has been at that particular position. But cornerback 2 and right guard are, in my opinion, massive holes for this team.
You have expressed interest in trading for the cornerback Bradbury.
Yeah, he's very expensive too. And who knows? I mean, we could see something happen during the draft with a trade, but he is going to be expensive. If they're going to pay somebody, it's going to be at cornerback. It's not going to be at safety, in my opinion.
I mean, that's a good. Putting it in perspective, who would you rather have? Bradbury to shore up we'd be solid at cornerback if we brought him on board through a trade. I'd certainly rather have him than the Honey Badger at this point.
Yeah, so I think the Rams are going to be active during the draft. I think they're going to be jockeying. They might keep that third round pick, or some consider it a fourth round pick, because it's so far at the end of the third round, beyond the end of the third round. But go for a cornerback there, maybe a guard, inside lineman, and then after that, they may ultimately start to trade back and accumulate even more picks in the sort of the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how they approach it. But that's their MO. And
right. I mean, they've been so good at that. I'm sure they have a bunch of guys identified they'd love to have on the roster that might be there in the 6th and 7th round. So why not accumulate extra picks there? That's Les Snead at his best. That's a good discussion. Covered all 3 topics. That's great. And a reminder, we're going to have Tom and Paul Walia back on in a couple weeks for our pre-draft roundtable. That's going to be a lot of fun. But thanks for your time, Tom. And we'll do this again real soon, okay?
That's great. Thanks for having me.
Now, you all know I love to do my Fearsome Four questions, my Fearsome Four lists, and such. And you also know that I have a problem with names. Guilty as charged. I'm horrible at names. The thing is that I actually had a little bit of a career as a sports writer, and in my regular, normal career, I do a lot of writing, and I consider myself an excellent writer. I consider myself an excellent speller. However, when you're writing, pronunciation isn't very important. It's kind of meaningless, actually, right? So here I am podcasting, and suddenly spelling doesn't count for anything. I write up outlines for some of these podcasts. I can spell things however I want. But when it comes to pronouncing, game on, and I often lose. So the other day I was discussing some of these names that I struggle with. A couple people were kind of making fun of me, and I thought, you know what? I don't think I'm the only one that has trouble with some of these names. I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to make my Fearsome Four hardest Ram names to pronounce. And the Rams have a pretty good list, and I'm going to give you my 4 honorable mentions to start here. And one of them is when I messed up almost the entirety of last season, and that's Ben Skowronek. Honorable mention number 1, Ben Skowronek. Honorable mention number 2, Chidi Ahanotu. Probably getting that one wrong. And honorable mention 3, CJ Ayu? Let's roll with that. And honorable mention number 4, Oshiomogho Atagwe. Atagwe's not too bad, but you go ahead and roll with Oshiomogho in the middle of a podcast. Have fun with that. Now the countdown for my top 4, my Fearsome 4 hardest Ram names to pronounce. Coming in at number 4, you remember the tight end, Brandon Manumalauna. Just rolls right off the tongue there. Fearsome hardest name number 3 to pronounce. This was not too bad, but I still struggle with it. Pisa Tinoi Samoa. One of my favorite players from the dark days following this greatest show on turf. Fearsome hardest name number 2. Ogbania Okoronkwo. Now, a lot of people call him Ogo. I got to call him Oko. It doesn't really matter. We all knew who we were talking about, and we were all trying extremely hard to not have to say his real name. And fearsome hardest Ram name to pronounce of all time. And I still don't know how to say this. First name's piece of cake, Michael. Last name, not so much. Bear with me here. Humenawa Nui, the tight end out of Illinois. There are my Fearsome 4 hardest Ram names to pronounce. Most of these in the last 20 or so years. There's probably some good ones from back in the old days, but these are all names that most of you have heard and know. My Fearsome 4 hardest Ram names to pronounce. Going to rehash my power rankings this week. I'm not going to go through my top 10. I did want to compare my last power rankings to the power rankings Colin Cowherd just posted. He had his top 10 and do a quick comparison. We were in complete agreement. 1, 2, 3, Bills, Rams, Bucks. The Bengals I had 4th. He had them 6th. We both had the Chiefs at 5. I had the Raiders 7. He had them at 8. I had the Chargers at 9. He had them at 7. And he had the 49ers at 10, as did I. The big difference was I still had the Packers and Titans in my top 10, 6 and 8 respectively. And he had the Broncos at number 4 and the Ravens at number 9. Interesting. I might have the Packers and the Titans rated slightly higher than I should, but I don't really see the Ravens necessarily at number 9. The Broncos at 4. I mean, I know they got a good defense. They brought in Russell. They have a good receiving core, but I'm still not buying Broncos at 4. I think I like my ratings a little better, although maybe Broncos in the top 10 instead of the Titans. Maybe the Ravens in the top 10 instead of the Packers, but I would definitely have the Broncos and Ravens probably more like 8 and 9 rather than 4 and 9. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach out to us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website at laramsup.com. And please don't forget to subscribe and give us that 5-star rating. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.
Music courtesy of bensound.com and the YouTube royalty-free music audio library, Crimson Fly by Humma Humma.